The people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. "If we say from heaven, he'll say to us, 'Why then did you not believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we're afraid of the crowd, for all regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' He answered, 'I will not.' But later he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second and said the same, and he answered, 'I go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father?" They said, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him." About a month ago, I mentioned the book The Alchemist. And in this story, this shepherd has this dream that there's a treasure, this huge treasure waiting for him in the pyramids in Egypt. And so he embarks on this journey. He sells his flock of sheep, he takes the money, and he takes off from this area in Spain where he's from and goes into Africa, into Arabia. And as he takes this 2-hour boat journey across the straits and gets into Arabia, he comes to this bar/cafe, and he's there dumb enough to show his money as he's getting it out to pay for some tea. And this guy comes along and basically scams him out of all his money. He says, "Here, we got to make sure you've got enough money to make this journey, so I'll hold on to it for you, and we'll go about our way, and I'll help you to get to the pyramids." Well, of course, as he gets enthralled with this sword in the marketplace, and then it hits him that he'd been focusing on this sword for too long, he's like, "I know when I turn around, this guy's going to be gone." And sure enough, took all his money, and he was gone. So he was left in this area for a while where he had to work to get his money back, save up enough money again to continue his journey. And he comes across this man who is up on top of a hill. He lives up on this mountain, and he's got this shop. It's a crystal shop. But all the crystals sitting there in the window on display is kind of dirty. It's kind of foggy and dusty and stuff. And so this boy says to himself, "Well, maybe, just maybe, I can get a job working here and cleaning things up. In fact, instead of asking, I'm going to go ahead and just clean everything, and we'll see what happens." And so he takes his jacket, and he uses it to start polishing the crystal. And the shopkeeper watches him do it, but he doesn't say anything to him. And after a while, these customers start coming, more and more of them, because the crystal looks more attractive, and so they're more likely to purchase it, and they do. And so sales pick up, all these people come, and the guy looks at him and he says, "All right, I get it. You're hired. I'll pay you X amount to make sure that things are kept up here and clean and whatnot." But see, the boy wasn't satisfied with that. He finally said, if you build a shelf outside, a display, and put the crystal out there, more people would be able to see it from farther away, and they'd be more likely to come and bring more customers. And he says, "No, I've had it this way for 30 years. Things are good enough. Let's just leave it alone." But the boy convinces him. They build the shelf, they put the crystal on display, even though the man is concerned that somebody's going to come by and knock it all over and make a big mess. But it's very successful. Even more customers start coming, and they start selling more crystal. And then these people coming up the mountain, and when they finish their hike, they say, "I wish there was a place to get a cup of tea once we've made this long trek up the mountain." Ding! boy has another idea. He says, what if we were to serve tea in this crystal? Then people would really want to buy it. And sure enough, people come up there, they drink the tea, and some people are saying, oh, the tea tastes better because it keeps the aroma inside with the crystal. And some said, oh, I'm having guests later tonight, and my wife would be so pleased if I came home with this fine crystal to serve our guests in. And so sales are just booming. And finally, one day, the boy has saved pretty much enough money to continue his journey, to continue seeking his treasure at the pyramids in Egypt. And he's sitting down talking to the man who is a Muslim. And the boy says, why were you always so reticent to do better? And the man got kind of emotional. He says, in my religion there are 5 things that I must do as a Muslim man. I must pray 5 times a day. I must fast during Ramadan. I must do all of these things. But the one thing that I haven't been able to do was go on my Hajj, my pilgrimage to Mecca. He says, I envision this every day. I see myself going and walking around the stone 7 times and then kissing it and feeling that blessing. He says, but I've just never gone. I've never been able to because I've had to run this shop. And the boy says, yeah, but we've both made so much money now, we can do it. I can go on my journey, I can find my treasure, and you can go on your pilgrimage. We'll even take turns. I'll stay and watch the shop for you while you go. And the man said, no, I'm not going to. Well, the boy was dumbfounded. Why? You finally got your opportunity. It's your dream. And the man said, no, I'm not going on this pilgrimage any more than you are going to go off and find your treasure. And the boy looked at him puzzled. He said, why? This is what you've always wanted. This is what you dreamed of. This is what you lived for. And he said, yes. That's precisely why I will never go on my pilgrimage. He says, because if I attain the dream, it's no longer a dream. It's a reality, and it's the dream that I live for. He says, once I do it, what else do I have to live for? I've completed my task. I'm done. If I give up on it and say I'll never do it, the dream is also gone. Still, I have nothing to live for. But if I keep it a dream, if I tell my friends that someday I'm going to do it, if I tell myself that someday this is going to happen, I'm going to walk around this rock 7 times, that gives me purpose. That gives me a reason to live. That is a sad existence. And I wonder about people who teach or mentor or show people through leadership different mindsets, different ideas of how to think, different ways that we should see the world. And one big example of a great leader is Moses, right? I mean, he leads all of these Israelites, these Hebrew people out of Egypt, and he saves them from the Pharaoh. I mean, what a dynamic leader. Well, okay, I won't say dynamic because he did tell God that I can't speak very well, so you're going to have my brother do the acting for me. But okay, but he still got the job done, right? I mean, rallied all these people, got them to look up to him, encourages them. But wait a minute. When I look at this story, the things that aren't written stand out to me as much as the things that are. See, you've got all of these Hebrew people, once again, bickering, moaning, complaining. They're thirsty. Right? And they go to Moses and they say, thanks a lot for bringing us out here to die of thirst, you big jerk. What does Moses do? Moses doesn't go to God. This is what, in hindsight, after we read a scripture, or I would try to recall it, we hear what we want to hear, right? So right now, if we think of it, we hear Moses going to God and saying, God, you have brought us thus far. Please continue to provide for us for your people call out to you. That sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? That ain't what it says. Moses went to God and said, I'm going to save my own rear end. They're going to stone me in 2 seconds if something doesn't happen, so do something quick. Right? Moses was out for himself. Moses was not an encourager. Moses was an enabler. And there's a world of difference. Look at these Hebrew people. Did it say that after they wandered searching for water for 3 days, for a week, after they dug multiple holes in the sand, seeking a well, they finally became discouraged and went to Moses for help? No. They were sitting there on their hands the whole time, complaining. Never once does it say that they tried to find water. Never once does it say that they tried to do anything for themselves. Instead, you have Moses giving them this big rallying speech, and that sets them loose, and nothing happens. Why? Because when the leader does everything for the people, that's not a leader. It's a doer. That's an enabler. That's a person who lets people just kind of sit on their ducks and not really do anything. They can say, I'm going to do something someday, right? We can have our dreams, but nothing gets done. If you look at all of the literature from HBR or wherever on leadership, right? It's always about a dynamic leader, but not a leader who does everything for the people. It's not a leader who gives this rallying speech and then says, okay, good luck with that. Right? It's not somebody who washes their hands of the situation, but it's not somebody who goes and does all the work either. And Moses, we think of him as a great leader, but look at the way the story turns out. He's got this staff that God gives him because he knows that Moses doesn't have the confidence to trust God enough to do things with the power that God has instilled in him. So all the time he's taking this staff and he turns it into a snake to scare the Pharaoh or to intimidate him, right? He takes his stake and he raises his stick and he raises it up, right? Lifts up the staff and the Red Sea is parted. In the end, Moses never makes it to the promised land because he takes the staff and he hits the rock with it, and the water pours out. See, Moses never got there. Moses never got to the point where he realized that he had the God-given power inside of him to do whatever he was called to do. He never had enough faith in himself. He never had enough faith in God to realize his dreams or to even think that such a thing was possible. And if you don't believe that yourself, how can you teach others? And it shows. It shows with all these people wandering, lonely, miserable in the desert, wanting to go back to slavery because it's what they knew. Even though it wasn't good, it was what they were comfortable with. And so they're constantly bickering and moaning and wanting to go back to Pharaoh, even though there was great oppression there. Moses never finds his dream. He never attains his life's purpose. God told him to command water out of the rock. I'm guessing if God tells you to do something, probably means God gave you the power to get it done. But Moses didn't trust him. He takes his little magic wand, that staff that served him so well for so long, that little crutch that he's been holding on to, taps the rock, and the water comes out. And the people are happy because Moses provided for them again. Moses did for them again. Moses covered their rear ends so that they didn't have to do anything for themselves. But when God sees that, God says, you know what? You did it again. I need a leader who can lead. And you're not doing that. So I need you to go out and find a successor. And he finds Joshua. Right? And Joshua takes the people into the promised land. Moses never, ever gets there. And this story right here is a perfect example. That oasis appears, right? We said that in the story. All of a sudden there's an oasis, there's palm trees, there's water, it's abundant, lots to drink, everything's perfect. Do you think that oasis wasn't there all along? I bet you it was. I bet you it was right there the whole time. But because those people were sitting on their rear ends, sitting on their hands, not moving, not getting up, not looking, they never found it. Why? Because they were scared. Oh dear God, what if we realize our dreams? Then we'll have nothing to live for. It's much better to sit here, to sit still, to sit in place, to gripe and moan, but tell myself that someday I'm going to get there. I remember we had a friend in the family when I was living in Japan. He was an old friend of my father-in-law, and he gave me a Japanese katana. You know, and he was a really cool guy. He had all these stories, but then I realized later that a lot of the stories weren't necessarily true because, you know, he had a knack for kind of bending the truth a little bit. In fact, it got so bad that he lied to himself enough that he really didn't even know which direction he was heading in. He went and borrowed money from my boss so that he could start a computer repair company. Rented space for him, but never really paid the rent. But because they were friends, it was kind of an uncomfortable situation. He couldn't say, dude, you got to pay up, so kind of left on a bad note. Then he goes to my father-in-law and borrows money and says, I want to do the kind of work you do, which is construction surveying, so I'm going to go out and help you to sell your services. So I'm going to kind of set up my own shop as a subcontractor, but just selling the services, and then I'll send you the business. Well, that didn't work out so well because that really wasn't what he was made to do either. And after he did 7 or 8 of these little business ideas of his, he'd racked up $500,000 in debt just to the people in the community. And one day, his wife, I didn't hear it, I wasn't there, this is how the story goes. One day his wife went to him and said, well, I guess you know what you have to do now, don't you? See, in Japan, when you take your own life, you can still claim all your life insurance. And so, later that day, they found him at the temple, hanging from a tree. And his wife never paid back a cent to anybody, by the way. Now, I'm telling this to bring everybody down and depress everybody. I'm saying it doesn't have to be that way. And that's what it says right here. It does not have to be that way. It does not. We have dreams. Dream dreams, but live your dreams. Kids, especially you guys, we're going to tell you that you can achieve anything you put your minds to. We're going to tell you to dream big because you can do it. Sometimes we're not going to set a good example of what that looks like. And what we're probably not going to tell you is that, yes, you can achieve whatever you want to, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take sweat. It's going to take blood. It's going to take tears. It's going to take a lot of times of wanting to give up and go back to whatever you came from. But you can do whatever you set your mind to. And you know what you were made for. So do it. Just remember, it's not going to be easy. And nobody can do it for you. Just ask any of us. You got to work for everything that you got. So, dream. Live, have something that you're living for, but do. Because it's in the doing that makes those dreams a reality. So, how many people actually took 5 minutes to chillax last week? Just 5 minutes to have a wusa moment and just meditate or be in silence? Yeah, good. Well, guess what? I got you right where you want you. We're just gonna sit. Now, and I know silence is so uncomfortable, so I'm gonna do something a little different. We're gonna do, I'm sure I didn't invent this, I'm sure people have already done this, but you know, when you fix your mind on something like a saying, right? We've done centering prayer, you know, Jesus Christ have mercy on me, a sinner, or whatever the saying is that kind of keeps us focused. I'm gonna play music. Okay, I'm going to play a beautiful song. I think it's beautiful. Focus on the music. Whether it's the horns or the cellos or the violins, it doesn't matter what they are. You don't have to be thinking, okay, here's the horn playing the counterpoint to the... Don't worry about that. But hear it. Follow the melody in your mind. Follow as they split and the harmony begins. Just follow that with you. Before we do, I want you to... You're going to cover your ears like this so you can't hear anything. You're just going to hear that sound, kind of like the ocean, right? Sound of silence. And you're going to hear your own heartbeat. 10 breaths, okay? Closing your eyes tight, covering your ears tight. Just be aware of your breath. Because then once you uncover your ears and open your eyes, your senses will be heightened. You'll be more aware. So go ahead and do that now. Just 10 breaths. Be alert.